I was a radical. I grew up like in the punk scene. And I organized for a lot of very far left organizations, socialist organizations, communist organizations, anti-racist organizations, anti-fascist organizations. I organized ANTIFA demonstrations. It wasn't until I really was out of college and working in human rights that I realized how much of the information that had been given to me, how much of the narratives that I had been given in universities by these people that I trusted, because why wouldn't you trust your professor, especially an Ivy League professor? They're the best of the best of the best, you know, like why wouldn't they be telling you truth? You know, it wasn't until I was out of college and working in human rights that I realized just how much of what I had been given was absolute nonsense that was completely like seeped, like drenched in anti-Semitic propaganda. And I've just been endlessly impressed by the uncrushable Jewish spirit, by the desire to bring light into the world, even in the darkest of times, to like dafka do that. I think on the whole, if you just look around you, you see like achadut as opposed to like hatred, you know?
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jew Function. I'm very happy to be here today. Leo, this is Seth, and with us today is a very special guest. She's a character. You're gonna see. Oh, just from the 15-minute setup, I gathered that much about her. Her name is Ateret Violet Shmuel. She is the founder and director of Indigenous Bridges, which is a global initiative dedicated to uplifting indigenous communities, fostering unity across cultures, traditions, and identities, which we love. Unity, you know, anything with unity, we dig. And also from all the content that she put out, I managed to gather that she comes from a very liberal house, not particularly religious, and she started as an extreme liberal, went into college, got even more radicalized, and then managed to somehow use that energy to propel herself above that while retaining her liberal values and her deep, human connection. So that's what we really like about her, and we'll hear all about it from her. Hi, Ateret. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
On the Jew Function, we try to, we really want to solve anti-Semitism. And we feel that a lot of it has to do with helping people change their perceptions. And I hear in your clips, I hear you talk a lot about people's perceptions and how you have certain perceptions and how these perceptions are being, can be manipulated. And in general, I think if people live long enough, they begin to realize that the way we perceive the world really is sometimes a far cry from what's actually happening in reality, if you can even talk about that as an objective truth. In other words, we're influenced by so many things. Our lenses, so to speak, are clouded, are broken, cracked, smudged, and we see a world that's through a lens that's being placed in front of our eyes. And most of us stay in that worldview, and we kind of get sucked into it, and we get manipulated by all kinds of forces. So I'm curious, maybe you can tell us to start how you found the strength or the courage or just the ability to lift your head from your whatever programming you came with and to pick a different path for yourself. Maybe give us a little background and then how that shift.
Maybe start like in who you were in university and like what was going on there, and then what you experienced and how that shift.
Okay, let's see where to start. So I grew up very, very, very far left. I come from a family of activists and academics, and human rights was always a big piece of our upbringing. It was also a very big piece of our our Jewish identity. We were those like Tikkun Olam Jews, the ones that really don't have much connection to Judaism outside of just like that idea, which is sort of like taken outside of the context of Judaism and generalized to like human rights and social justice everywhere, which often unfortunately leads to, holding pretty anti-Jewish views ultimately in the West. And so I was a radical. I grew up like in the punk scene. And I organized for a lot of very far left organizations, socialist organizations, communist organizations, anti-racist organizations, anti-fascist organizations. I organized ANTIFA demonstrations, and many other things. And then, and I actually started a couple of NGOs, one of which dealt with sort of like combating racism and bigotry and colonialism, like when I was in college. And then I ended up going to a very liberal Ivy League. Now, I'm not sure if you all
did all that in high school?
Huh?
All that you just said you had already done in high school?
I was organizing for I was organizing
impressive
social justice stuff in high school. My upbringing was a little crazy. And
then you went to Brown.
And I went to Brown. And by the time I got to Brown, I was already radical, so it wasn't so hard. But I was studying 2 degree paths at the same time. I was learning psychology and also comparative religion and Middle Eastern history. And so many of my professors, I grew up rough. Like I grew up pretty, my childhood was not so simple. As most people my generation that ended up in the punk scenes were. And so, it was a big deal that I made it to an Ivy League. And once you get to a place like that, especially because especially if you come from a place where people don't think you can make it to a place like that, you really, the words that are given to you by these professors who sort of like idolize, like you view them as gurus or gods, God forbid, a lot of the information that I was getting from these professors was pure Qatari anti-Semitic propaganda. I didn't understand that then, but now in retrospect, I see exactly what it was, and I became even further radicalized. I ran an organization that was supposed to be like the progressive middle path to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and all this nonsense with like Cornel West and Rabbi Michael Lerner and like blah, blah, blah. And we won't name that organization because I don't want to give it any more airplay than it already has had. But I was involved in a lot of the, as a Jew, internalized anti-Semitic nonsense because I have always had a very, very strong moral compass. I'm like violently allergic to injustice. And so I really felt, and a lot of that I think was informed by my Jewishness, my Jewish upbringing, my Jewish soul. And it wasn't until I really was out of college and working in human rights that I realized how much of the information that had been given to me, how much of the narratives that I had been given in universities by these people that I trusted, because why wouldn't you trust your professor, especially an Ivy League professor? They're the best of the best of the best, why wouldn't they be telling you truth? It wasn't until I was out of college and working in human rights that I realized just how much of what I had been given was absolute nonsense that was completely like seeped, like drenched in anti-Semitic propaganda. And my real turning point was the Marmara of 2010. That was like the real aha moment for me, because it was so obvious and I was so privy to all of the information because I was working in human rights. And that really was my big pivot moment where I started using whatever currency my voice had to start sort of pulling apart a lot of these stories and narratives that people were spreading about Jews in Israel. But up until that point, I didn't really realize just how much of it was lies.
And you realized it was lies because you were working on the inside, and you got to see the communications around such big publicity stunts like the Marmara Flotilla event. Just so people know, not everybody.
And why did like you see it and the other people around you not see it?
Yeah, hold on. So before I said, let's just give in parentheses so people know. In 2010, I believe, right, there was a convoy of ships led by the Turkish vessel Marmara, and they attempted to breach the Israeli naval blockade, much like Greta and her buddies try to do now, right? But this, when it happened back then, Israel was a little less adept at handling this from a publicity standpoint. When the Israeli commander boarded the ship, there was some violent clashes, and 9 activists were killed, and that created a lot of sparked a big controversy and a big furthering the narrative of like, oh, Israelis bad, everyone else good, right? So now
right, but the thing about the Marmara was that I was active in human rights at the time, and so I understood who the people on that vessel were, and they were not activists in the sense that I'm an activist. They were people that were associated with Islamist terrorist organizations who were involved in human trafficking, sexual violence, oppression of indigenous minority groups, like things that were not like it was sold to the world as if it was this like humanitarian vessel, much like Regreta's humanitarian vessel was, even though they didn't have any aid on it. They had like a sandwich and 2 tampons and like decided that they were going to save all of Gaza. And sorry, I just got a call. And so I saw this vessel. I knew about the people that were on it, and I knew about their terror ties. And so I was horrified by that, because my like moral compass is pretty consistent. And as I care about human rights and was aware that these people were associated with organizations that were violating human rights, the fact that they were calling themselves humanitarians was laughable. And the fact that they had no humanitarian aid was also laughable. And the fact that when the IDF, the Israeli forces boarded the ship, they were unarmed. They had paintball guns. They had no live ammunition, and they were attacked with, I believe, pistols, pipes, and knives. Everything was recorded, like even back then they still had body cams. So and they released that footage to the public, right? Everybody had access to it. Unfortunately, as we still have an issue with today, it took like a little while for them to release that footage. And by that time, this narrative about like Jews being evil had spread around the world. But they basically were attacked and then fought back. But the people that they were attacked by were these Islamist terror supporters on this boat trying to break international law and the
So the question is I'll just ask what Seth asked again. How come you saw it and so many other people are blind to it and are not seeing it even today? And forget, maybe back then it was a questionable event and it wasn't covered properly, let's say. But today, October 7th was so well documented, and still people refuse. Like once I have a certain program, a certain lens through which I see the world, very, very hard for me to
even October 7th versus what's happening in Iran, like the public outcry on the college campuses. Like, how is it that people don't see?
Come on, out with it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so there's a lot.
How come you're the only one who saw?
There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, you have this reality in the Western world where I feel like, especially in places like America, right, which is, I feel a little bit more comfortable speaking about than like other places, because I spent more time there. You have people who do not feel a sense of belonging. Like their experience of life is sort of like empty, right? Like American society is very individualistic. And people are these like tribal pack animals that are, like throughout our history, it's packaged into our biology to be a part of something, to be a part of community, to have tribe, to have, like your people, your family. And that doesn't exist so much in Western society, especially in in America. And so you have people who are empty inside, who are just desperately seeking meaning and belonging and connection. And that's like a deeply human need. It's like packaged into our DNA. And so many people in the West really don't have that. And so in lieu of, the traditional things that held that space in human society, like religion, family, community, people seek that out in sports, but also in politics and political alignments. And so you find that there are people that are deeply emotionally invested, that their identity is connected to their association with a political.
It becomes tribal.
It's that tribalism that exists within us. And it's what gives them a sense of belonging and purpose and meaning in life. And so even if that group shifts its like morals or ethics or foundation or belief system in a way that's incompatible with an individual's own ideals or belief system, if they feel emotionally invested and attached enough to that party or that movement, it's very difficult for people to be able to pull themselves out of it, because that's like unraveling one's own identity, which is not something that your average human being is very comfortable with. Like that's
very clear
task. And so if you have people whose their entire identity is built around like, I'm a leftist, I'm a good person, I'm a humanitarian, I'm the best of the best. And there's a lot of ego in the left. It's a lot of like, we're the academics, we're the ones that question things, we're the ones that believe in science, we're the ones that, like we reject, primitive belief systems, we're better than everybody else. And so to have that be such a big part of your identity, and over the last 15, 20 years, the more there's been this like creeping in of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel sentiment that's become, unfortunately, a piece of party politics within the American left. And the American left has not done enough to challenge that in any way, shape, or form. And so now it is rampant. And so you have people who watched with their own eyes the sexual violence, the kidnapping, the slaughter of children, the murder of innocent human beings on October 7th, but they couldn't go against their party lines.
Well, I just found there was this great book by Lisa Krohn. I don't know if you know her. It's called Story or Die. It's about script writing and story writing. She used to write. She was in marketing, and then she went into film and writing scripts and all that. And she really broke down the whole idea of story. And she says, I'm paraphrasing, but she says something along the lines of, people resist changing their minds because doing so would destabilize the internal story they used to belong to their social group or their tribe. The story is deeply tied to identity and survival instincts in the brain. So conflicting evidence triggers emotional resistance rather than rational reassessment.
Correct.
There's a book called Ordinary Men about this German police force. They were not fanatical Nazis, these guys. They were like ordinary, middle-aged, working class men. And the book like meticulously documents how they committed crazy atrocities, because it's like that Sanford experiment with the prison guards kind of thing. If we could change to psychology for a second. So it doesn't matter if the facts are presented. Once you belong to a tribe, that need, maybe it's a psychology, maybe it's something even deeper, that need is so strong within us that even presented with facts, we can't move from our belief. Question is, wouldn't it be wonderful to create a certain tribe around another belief system that gives people a home, that instead of trying to just fight something because you can have all the facts in the world, it doesn't matter. People are willing to die. People are willing to go to jail, even if they're presented with all the facts and they're totally wrong. It doesn't change their beliefs. Like we see where's all the outrage on the college campuses over what's going on in Iran, right? Where's all the women who said...
That's consistent also with the Iran and anti-Israel thing is connected.
Yeah, you're actually explaining it, Ateret. You said that these people they actually support the regime, so that's why they're not going out against it.
Yeah.
So makes sense. Go on, Seth. Finish
okay, there's so many questions, but towards something practical, like if we really crystallize this point, then what's towards a better future means having a tribe that's holistic, that includes everyone, that gives them a sense of meaning, gives them a sense of purpose, and isn't about harming others. Like creating, we can define more accurately, more harmoniously, integrally what that tribe would be. Maybe we could say it's the Jews, or some kind of, but to have some kind of tribe that gives these people a place to go, because we see that the reason kids join gangs and the reason people join crime and all these groups on campus is because they don't have it, right?
It's a belonging.
So there's a vacuum there. So wouldn't it be, if we were intelligent people who want a better future, and not only some bullshit we're making up because we think we're smart, but it's connected to a couple thousands of years of history that's the foundation for Western civilization, and has like some kind of messianic, beautiful, the brotherhood of man, everyone will love the fellow. Wouldn't it behoove us to work on creating this tribe?
Yeah, it would. And
Can
it
you help us?
It would definitely, it would be beneficial to the entire world if there was, like a place where people could find meaning without, oppressing or harming others. Like that's like...
But why doesn't that naturally grow out of all of these progressive circles that you were in? Why is that kind of thing not growing?
Because the progressive circles are actually really high judgment, high criticism, like critical spaces, right? Where
some say they like empathy.
So it's really funny because there's this story that we all told ourselves about like how we were the most humanitarian, most empathetic, most compassionate, most, humanitarian, like the best people, like that we're the ones that care about others, like that we're the ones, we care about human rights, but it's really, when it comes down to it, the truth is I really thought for a very long time, especially before October 7th, even after October 7th, like just shortly after October 7th, that there were so many people that I grew up with and people that I knew and people in the academic world and like all of that, like, yes, they got swept up in this wave, like of being part of a movement is intoxicating, like, I don't know if you've ever been to a huge demonstration or if you've been a part of it, but if you're like a part of this, like ocean of people all doing, like focusing your energy in one direction, it's very intoxicating. It's like, it's incredible. And that's an experience that a lot of human beings lack without community. You know what I'm saying? Like I have now when I'm in Bet Knesset on occasion, but it's not, it's a little bit different. And so I really thought that people would have this experience. They drink the Kool-Aid, and then after a while they'd wake up and they look at reality, because I mistakenly believed that most people care about truth the way that I do, and that most people hold themselves accountable and question themselves the way that I do. I think that for part of the reason I got out of that world is because I do really care about reality and factual, like empirical truth. And also I'm always willing to examine my beliefs and examine, my stances and challenge them and see whether or not they're true, or they're still true, or they're still relevant, or if things have changed and I need to reassess and sort of change my belief system in some way. And a lot of people, they can't do that.
It's called, I think in psychology, it's called metacognition, right? It's thinking about thinking and evaluating how you relate to things. We have there's a great, well, she used to be an author, and she used to be, also a far left activist here in Israel, and then she switched sides. And she says, she's great. She had the way with words, and she says that she always likes to be right, and in order for her to always be right, she has to change her mind constantly to always be right.
You have to allow new information to come into your cognitive schema and assess whether or not that challenges your existing belief system.
Exactly.
You need to be able to admit when you're wrong.
So this is a very good point, and some would say that not everyone is capable of that. And the question is, well,
it's a big ask. We have to lower the bar. I mean, it's good for unique. Like, how many people, Ateret, are like you who did what you did?
I mean, I know a lot of people who have seen similar things to me, who come from similar backgrounds and have sort of backed out of it because they've understood how toxic it was. Not all of them go into fighting it the way that I have, or like bringing awareness to it the way that I have. But I don't know. I think part of what fuels me and my desire, it's a compulsion. It's not even a desire to speak about it, is because I have this like unkillable faith in humanity. And yeah, I mean, like it's been I don't know, a little bit damaged over the last 2.5 years, but
trampled.
Maybe a lot damaged. Maybe I've lost a lot of faith in humanity. But all of that faith that I've lost in humanity, I've seen, like, I've sort of shifted it over to my own people, we really have stood up and done incredible things. And I
talk about that.
Oh, our nation is amazing.
Tell us.
We do such wonderful things. And I've just been endlessly impressed by the uncrushable Jewish spirit, by the desire to bring light into the world, even in the darkest of times, to like dafka do that. The way we come together, the way we support each other, the way that, like, whenever we're in crisis, even if we like hate each other, you have like a right winger and a left winger and like whatever, who are like screaming in each other's faces, but the second there's an air raid siren, they grab each other and like help each other's kids into the bomb shelter. Like that's Am Israel. Like there's something that like ties us together. It's our, we're like ridiculous, obnoxious, crazy, stubborn people, but we're also hilarious and brilliant and wonderful and kind and good. And we see that time and time and time and time again. And I think that the last 2+ years of war have really brought that out in our people, despite what the media might be trying to like wedge into our society. I think on the whole, if you just look around you, you see like a chadut as opposed to like hatred,
I agree. Unfortunately, I also see the cracks in the in the wall. Like, it's still not.
Bro, she was trampled.
No.
She was building back up, and you're
said that we have.
Hey, I can have my beliefs challenged.
Yeah, we're just warming up. No, first of all, this is a good image, and I want you to keep it, because we'll get back to it. I wanted to take, just have a step to the side and ask you something, maybe a couple questions, maybe more kind of personal. I mean, not personal about this topic that we're discussing, because you had said in the beginning that you came from a home that believed in this activism and the tikkun olam, that change the world, correct the world, right? Follow the moral compass and all that. So I want to ask you and see if you can kind of sum it up, right? Because maybe there's a big worlds, but what exactly do you think? What do you think? What were you trying to correct, or what are people trying to correct when they say tikkun olam, when they say correcting the world? What are we correcting?
I think everybody has their own tikkun, right? Like each and every single one of us has this like little piece of the world that we're like uniquely qualified to affect change in, right?
Which is?
It's different for everyone. It's absolutely
Okay.
like there's no like one size fits all answer for that. I think what is it? Rebbe Nachman says that you're born at the moment that God decides that the world can't exist without you in it, and like and there's like actually the Rebbe, is it the Rebbe? Some Chabad something talks about how like if there's something that you find that I don't know, I don't even remember if I can find the direct quote, but basically in like to sort of paraphrase it, if you like see a piece of the world that's broken and it really bothers you, that's because that's your job to fix it,
Okay. So on this, so a lot of people, I'm sure, wake up in the morning, people who also listen to the Jew function, and people maybe like you who grew up with this good, good ideal of connection, the spirit of connection, right? Of correction. I'm sorry, I keep saying connection. Of correction. Let's fix the world and all of that. The question is, how do they know, how to fix it? How to know, what needs fixing and how to fix it? I see a world that's, full of people who have a lot of clashing beliefs on what needs correcting and how to correct it. How do you know? Isn't it equally dangerous if you're just rolling your sleeves and it's like, are we just going to run head on into some disaster without the proper gear, without the proper things? You could hurt yourself, you could hurt others. How do people know what needs correcting and how to correct it? How did you know? Do you think you knew?
It took me a while to find my niche, is the truth. Like I worked in human rights generally for a very long time, which is a very big world with a lot of brokenness. And my actual area of expertise and like academic background was actually in the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Right.
And then when I realized what a dead end it was, I realized that like no matter how much I poured into it, no matter how much I did, it was going to make zero impact whatsoever. I refocused my energy to indigenous communities.
Because you thought you could help them more, or because
so there's a few reasons why that happened. One is I always worked with indigenous communities. I've always felt an affinity for other indigenous tribal nations. There's something really, really beautiful and relatable, especially as a Jew, to other communities who have these like ancient traditions, whose faith is, transcends time and space, whose cultures, they have these like ancient cultures, language, dress, traditions, ceremonies.
Just like us.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing is that I didn't realize that, like, I became choseret b'teshuvah, like I became religious as an adult, but part of my like coming back to Judaism was because of my Native American friends being, being like, you also have this, like, what are you doing? You're Jewish. Like, what are you looking for? You have all of this. Just look at your own people. And they were right, but even before I really understood that about my own people, as a Jew, I, you have this sense of like connectedness to each other, to our traditions, to these like ancient words that we mumble before we do stuff, and, the ritual, the connection to our land, the connection to our nation, the connection to our names, that, like there's so much. And even before I really understood that about ourselves, I felt that and I saw it in others, and I really related to it in other indigenous people. And that was sort of how I ended up. I also noticed that the indigenous communities were not only the communities that were disproportionately targeted by genocide and colonialism, obviously, and I always was very much into anti-imperial, anti-colonialist, like restorative justice. I'm using all of the woke speak buzzwords right now. You're welcome. And
good for the algorithm.
I'm helping. And I realized that indigenous communities were disproportionately targeted, and also they were like completely unrecognized, unserved. There was no representation. There was, like, you'd be hard pressed to find any real research. You'd be hard pressed to find any real like activism that is like holistically focusing on Indigenous communities. And I noticed that we all share similar challenges. And I noticed that there was, starting about 15 years ago, it probably was before that. It definitely was before that also. I think it started in the 70s with the PLO. But I noticed as I started sort of like waking up to reality a little bit more, that there was a very intentional funneling of anti-Semitic propaganda into Indigenous communities by Qatar, Iran, and the PLO. And that these community spaces were being hijacked by Arab and Islamist colonialist powers that were appropriating the language of Indigenous rights in order to inappropriately weaponize it against Jews and try to paint Jews as white European colonialist settlers who illegally stole poor brown Indigenous land and are now committing genocide and apartheid and human rights atrocities and blah, blah, blah. And like, I noticed that there was no one in these communities that really knew enough to push back against it, because Indigenous tribal nations, Jews included, have faced a lot of historical trauma. Especially the communities that have experienced genocide, we tend to sort of, after a huge historical trauma like that, we tend to sort of circle our wagons and face inward and not trust the outside world and not really interact with people so much. So we're busy focusing on ourselves and trying to heal our communities. And so we don't know so much about other tribal communities, especially other little tribal communities that are also focused inward. And so I realized that there was a lot of really good people who were given really bad information, and that if they understood the truth, they would be horrified by it and they would reject that. And in my experience with Indigenous communities specifically, that has been the case. That is not my experience with leftist communities necessarily, but Indigenous communities who can see and relate to the experience of one another, one, they actually understand that they're being manipulated by a global colonialist empire, tend to reject that. And so I noticed that was happening. I noticed that there was nobody doing anything to stop it, really. Not nobody. There was a few activists within that space. But there was no like organization. There was no like real popular movement. People weren't collaborating. There was like a few voices here and there, but it wasn't like a thing. So I started Indigenous Bridges by like bringing all of those different voices together to work together.
So this is great work that you're doing. How does that compare to what's happening in the Jewish Indigenous community?
I mean, Jews are the funny thing is Jews generally like we don't speak of ourselves in this terms. People have started using ideas like indigeneity in part because of my team. But isn't Indigenous related to being of a certain place? Okay, so actually this is a really important question, because Indigenous is a word that gets thrown around a lot because it has a lot of currency, especially within the left. It's a buzzword. But it for the purposes of my work in international Indigenous rights, and for the purposes of my organization, we have a very, very narrow definition, which is really, really important because people can redefine words to mean whatever they want, as we see now happening all the time. But for the purposes of my work and my organization, to be an Indigenous people, and Indigenous people they have an ethnogenesis, so like the coming about of a people from within a specific land space. They have connections to that land that predate colonial contact, so historical ties to that land prior to other people arriving. They have a unique language, culture, dress, tradition, religion, spiritual framework that's connected to that people and that land, and the desire to pass that on to future generations. Okay. Now, that definition is narrow enough that there are people that very clearly fit into it, and there are people who very clearly don't. And so we work with the communities that do fit that definition.
I would argue that Jews are indigenous to an ideology, not to a land, but to an ideology.
That's an interesting.
But coined it right here. You can take it. You can use it. Because we are a hodgepodge. We don't come from one land, and that's part of our problem. That's why we were so nomadic. You know, there was a group that gathered around Abraham in Babylon, but then others came from other places, and then we moved around a lot, and eventually we only settled in Israel after we've gone through a good portion of our evolution as a nation. That journey has been part of our evolution too.
Nevertheless, it was 3,000 years ago. There's still something to say for it.
For sure. Hold on, I want to hear. Yeah, what were you going to say?
So there's a slight difference also between, like, we have two different narratives, right? There's the biblical story, like our cultural story that's in our Torah and our sages and whatever, all of our liturgy. And then there's history and science and like archaeology, genetic studies, and history that's written by other people, which shows that we're actually from this land. You know, like, do you know that? So archaeology shows that basically the Canaanites were occupied by Egypt, and the rule, right there was like a very strong hierarchy of the haves and have-nots, and basically at some point the have-nots overthrew Egyptian rule and began to live. They sort of like moved outside of cities and began like a more agrarian lifestyle. The pottery changed, and also it became a more like egalitarian society. And so it is entirely theoretically possible, although it might be considered heretical within, like, my circles, that our story of Yetziat Mitzrayim actually is our story of us freeing ourselves from colonialist oppression of Egypt. And our genetics show that we are from this land. Our coming about of a people is entirely tied to our coming and returning to the land of Israel, to the land of Canaan.
Well, we're not questioning that. We think the land of Israel plays a very important role in our evolution. We're just saying that because we've been around for so many years, thousands of years, as a nation, as a cohesive group formed around an ideology that traveled with us no matter where we went and what we went through, and that kept evolving with us as we went through these phases, whether they happened historically or not, in exact accuracy is not that important. What important is that it left a certain mark on this group that was evolving, which is this group, and the proof of that is the existence of this group. And the problem is that we existed for so long that even the scientific method and the historic method and all those other methods, we predate that as well. So they evolved while we were evolving as a nation. So that's why it's hard when people try to say, no, we only look at science and history. Well, that's very limiting. We only look at the Bible. That's very limiting. You need a picture that's all encompassing. And the only thing that all encompasses the Jewish people is the story of who the Jewish people are. Which brings me to the great question that we ask everyone. What is the Jewish? Who are the Jewish people? What are they? How would you define that group that you obviously belong to? But how would you explain that group's anomalous existence throughout history and disproportionate influence on the world and attention that they get from the world and everything else about them to an outsider, an alien, let's say, that would come and ask, who are these people? So what is that?
So I live a bit of a double life. Yeah. I have my geopolitical and very analytical and very like tachlis work in human rights and social justice and indigenous rights. And I also happen to be an Orthodox Jew, and I I think that sort of has it's my orthodoxy, it's my Judaism that has really given me the strength to see and bear witness to and assist in situations of some of the worst human rights atrocities in the world. I've seen horrible things. Horrible things. I often end up sort of assisting communities who are experiencing genocide, which is not a very simple thing to bear witness to. And I'm not built for that. I am a delicate little flower, and I carry all of it with me. I can still see, names and faces of victims of crimes against humanity that I dealt with 15, 20 years ago. But to have a foundational belief that there is a purpose and that things are happening in the way that they are, has been one of the things that has allowed for me to continue to show up in the way that I'm able to. So having said that, it's hard for me. Okay, so I can define Jews, the way that I do publicly when I talk about us as an indigenous tribal nation, which we are, which is an ethno-religious indigenous group originating in the southern Levant, who share an ancient culture and ties to our land that date back 4,000 years, with an incredible, unique, theosophical and legal system that we've carried with us and even made, as you brought up earlier, portable when we were forced out of our own land and into diaspora, which is, an indigenous people outside of their indigenous land. But it's hard for me to talk about us and what's allowed for our ridiculous, hilarious, scrappy, wonderful little nation to survive all of the insane things that we've survived without, bringing Hashem into it a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
bring it.
There's this feeling that not a feeling. So from the worldview that Leo and I come from, which is very much informed by Bala Sulam, the Yehuda Ashlag, huge Kabbalist, the Sulam commentary on the Zohar. So all humans are like a protein body, made out of all the stuff in the earth, right? We're all made of carbon and hydrogen and same stuff as leaves and trees and ants and rocks, right? Then there's this other piece of some star, let's say, that Bina, whatever it is, that comes down and is inside of everyone's heart, which is not terrestrial. And in most people, which let's call spark of God, let's call it the light of Bina, whatever we want to call it. For most people, it's completely covered. It's this urge to go back home, this urge to go back to the root of our soul, that unity, right? Some people, it starts to awaken a little bit, and they start searching for things. Some people, like the three of us, for example, it doesn't let us rest. You said earlier, I don't remember what you said. I can't, it's you said a couple things about it. I can't stop. I don't know, right? So people like us, and let's say that the Jewish nation, because what Leo was referring to was back in Babylon, when Abraham started this nation, it wasn't one genetic pool. It was from all those groups that were there, of this little microcosm of humanity, all of the people there that had this like us, that wouldn't let them rest. Those were the people that went out with Abraham. So some from them, some from them, some from them, some from them. So while on the one hand, there is this connection to the land, and there is the culture and the religion and the spiritual and everything, if we get to the root of the root of the root, the most common denominator for what we're talking about, it's this extraterrestrial, this root of our soul in us that's pulling us forward. And that the Jews are like the Jewish people, the Jewish tribe is just the vanguard of humanity, like the chalutzim of humanity, not just of like the land of Israel, but the first ones to be pulled towards this thing. And so I want to like come back to building that strong enough between us, gathering enough of us together, making enough of a tribe around us where that becomes a home for people to feel that, to grow that, to live in that, to explore that, to understand that.
People or Jews?
Well,
First
the Jews,
the one, then the other.
the Jews have the role of it's really for everyone. And also, like, let's not even get into like the 12 tribes, right? Who knows of all these indigenous people you're researching? Like, what are the odds, the chances that some of them probably are Jews in some way or another? And yeah, like if 10 of the 12 tribes are lost, it's got to be, 500 million, 1 billion people. Like who knows what the number is right now. So, but the Jews are positioned to be able, like you, out of all of those other people, you like arose out of that mess. Like the Jews out of all of humanity just are, because we've been through more shit, because we've been compressed and had to go through all of this, so much intense shit and intense scrutinies through all the generations, just means we're just leading the pack in a sense of towards where humanity has to go. All humanity has to get there.
Well, for me, and especially considering my framework, I like me becoming Chozeret B'Tshuva and like going back to Jewishness, like my own roots, was an act of decolonization. Like that it's re-indigenizing, it's decolonizing, to return to our traditions and to return to our wisdom, to return to our people. That is a radical act of decolonization. And it's really funny because a lot of the people that end up sort of being like gravitating towards me in my work are, outside of the other indigenous communities that I work with, a lot of the Jews that end up sort of gravitating towards us are people that come from similar not my background's a little unique, but like from like the far left or unaffiliated, like Jewish homes, people that don't know anything about being Jewish, people that have been fed this crazy narrative the Jews are like white European like European settlers or whatever. And like really don't know much about us, and then and whatever version of Judaism that they've been given has been this sort of like watered down, convenient, fake thing that has no power, and so there's no, it doesn't pull, at least like my generation, it doesn't pull us in at all, because there's nothing that like lights the little ember of our souls ablaze. There's nothing.
But being a Haredi probably isn't going to do it either.
Well, there's a whole spectrum of Jewishness. You don't have to be or Haredi or, completely secular. There's our tradition and our people have an enormous, spectrum of color and flavor. I happen to have found what really speaks to my soul within the Chabad Breslev Karlibach Rav Kook world, sort of like neo Hasidic. I'm on my dad's side. My dad's Ashkenazi, my mom's not. But my dad's like Chabad, or Zichrono Livracha, he passed away a few months ago, but he's like Chabad. Like we are from.
You grew up like that?
Huh? My father. So this is why I grew up without any Jewishness. My dad passed away at the age of 93. He was born in 1932.
Wow.
And he passed away in October. And he was one of these like very cerebral, intellectual, idealistic, like dreamer people. I'm way more practical and way more justice focused than he ever was. And so we used to clash about this a lot. But he after the Holocaust happened, he lost his faith and lost his connection to Judaism, and also was really repulsed by Judaism after like experiencing some very hard things and not being able to accept that there was power outside of himself. He like he felt the need for control. And also he needed everything to make sense intellectually. And that doesn't always happen. You know, we don't always get these like fixing answers for everything. And so he really struggled with it. And so we grew up, I didn't even know what it meant to be Jewish until I was like my late teens and met someone who grew up in a Chabad family and then like left it for a while. And
in the punk scene, you met them?
Yeah. She's the reason I became Chozeret B'Tshuva for real. She's like who planted the seed. She actually lives in Israel now too. She like went off the derech for a little while and found me because I was as off the derech as you could. And I didn't even know the derech existed. We would like in high school, I think we were seniors in high school, we'd stay up really late and just like learn these crazy things and make all these weird art projects and go to punk shows and make really bad music and really bad art. And at some point she like brought Chassidut into it. And it was like an experience that I had never had before. It was like feeling my soul, you know, like there had never been anything that had touched my soul.
Wow.
And once that happened, I couldn't, like, nothing else really had a draw to it the way that did. There was nothing else, you know, like all the pain and violence and craziness that I grew up around, like it wasn't so appealing anymore. And so it was a very slow process of me becoming religious. I don't know if you've noticed, but I haven't really lost my edge. And so
that's okay. We need the edge. That's part of the.
I still got my spice and my tattoo. So
you don't have to let go of those things. That's okay.
Yeah, no, I don't, and I'm grateful that I didn't. But you know, because I think that every Jew comes at Judaism from their own unique angle, and it's intentional. Like Hashem wants it that way, you know. But it was, I don't know. It's a very powerful thing what we have. So
exactly on that, take a now look at the whole thing from the outside. You know how you know all those great things you shared about what does it mean for you to be a Jew and how you came to it and how you're doing it, and that great picture that you created. And it sounds like a great group of people to have around. The question is, what, and from all the work that you've done and you're doing, why people hate the Jews? Now, I'll just preface it by saying that the last guest that we had
took us an hour and a half to get.
It's okay. We'll wrap it up in a few minutes. The last guest we had, he said that when you talk to people like one on one, they don't actually hate you can get along with even the most seething anti-Semite you can get along with. That's not a problem.
Recently, that was my experience for many years, but I think things have changed.
What's that? That was or wasn't?
So that was my experience in the past, and it is no longer my experience.
Okay, interesting. So you'll talk about that. But he said that he just thinks that people just need like even all the big anti-Semites, and they just need to have a Jew next to them. Everybody needs a Jew in their lives, and those people who are the ones who propel this hatred around. I'm not talking about the guys who just follow the herd, because they haven't had an independent thought in their heads yet. But those who try to direct the herd, those who are against the Jews because they don't have a good Jewish friend. The question is really, why is this still a thing? We've heard all kinds of answers on this show. We also heard, well, I'll just leave it at that. We heard all kinds of answers. None of them were really satisfying. I think some of them were good. If you look at them through a very narrow, very small lens, at a certain point in time, like if you look at history, as discrete pieces, you can say, well, now there's anti-Semitism because of this. And then 100 years ago, it was because of that. And 200 years ago, it was because of that. And 1,000 years ago, it was because of that. But when you try to connect all the dots and like, why is it still a thing? You know, people are born and die and born, you know, and yet this thing persists. Like it doesn't get purged out of humanity's wash cycle. Something, it's like, it doesn't matter how many times you go through the cycle, it doesn't go away. What did you find?
So again, I think that there's like the tachlis geopolitical, sociological, psychological answer. And then there's a Jewish answer. There's like a spiritually Jewish answer.
Give the answer that helps us solve the problem.
So we need to be Jews.
Nice one. Okay.
Yeah, nice. Which means, yeah.
It's hard to say this because I see every time that somebody brings up this thing, which is like such an integral part of Jewish, like our traditions, like this is like what our sages have always said. This is in the Torah. It's like very much a part of Judaism. Like if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, if we're not living up to our expectations, Hashem kind of kicks us around, you know, like, and tried to back us into shape, which is not like necessary from like a standard universalist Western perspective. It's not like the most healthy related. It's like,
well, let's say it's more like gravity. It's not like some jealous god up in the sky who's like, oh, you're not doing it. Whap. Let's say it's more like gravity. You know, it's like you get thrown into the water and you're like, please, water, be merciful. I have a family at home. It's not like the water is going to be merciful to you now. There's the laws that exist. If you get thrown into the water, either you know, like there's laws of gravity and flotation. And so if we look at it more that way, then if the Jews are this group that is the vanguard of humanity, and which is, you called it achdut before, you said, you know, like this, if we can do the thing that we're intended to do, not only will it be good for us, it will be good for the whole world.
Yeah, that is 100% true. But I think even before we really talk about that, like I want to also say that anti-Semitism, like from a tachlis geopolitical perspective,
yeah,
you know, anti-Semitism has always existed on all sides of all political spectrums, and
yeah.
It's this thing that people don't really understand because it sort of mutates based on society finds the most vile at any given moment, right? So like, you know, right wing, just using like the American bipartisan political system, right? So right wing anti-Semitism is a little bit easier, or it was easier over the last 15 years for people to identify because it generally, you know, sort of shows up in the form of like neo-Nazi white supremacism, right? Like it's the belief that Jews are those brown, foreign, rabble-rousing Middle Eastern socialists who will stop at nothing to overthrow the established order and, you know, they create chaos and pervert, you know, society and bring so that the proletariat can take over. So we must get rid of them so that we can have society in order. And left-wing anti-Semitism paints Jews as white European colonialist settlers who illegally stole poor brown indigenous Palestinian land and are committing genocide and apartheid and human rights atrocities and are responsible for the wars and are, you know, benefiting off the backs of minorities and are responsible for the slave trade and racism and blah, 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 whatever. It's all, both are crap. It's both nonsense. However, it's the Jew takes the place of, you know, it's like the effigy, you know, like in the way that the Christians created this scapegoat of Jesus. That's the role that we play in society, is we take on humanity's sins. So whatever a society doesn't want, you know, like their own biggest guilt, their own shame, the things that pain them the most about their own crimes, they project onto us. And so we've had to deal with this like shape-shifting hatred for as long as we've existed. And as long as we've been, every time that we don't have sovereignty, every time that we don't have autonomy, every time that we don't have our own land, our own army, our own police force, our own way to protect ourselves, we're at the whim of all of these other people who are projecting all of their sins, which has been a disaster historically. And now that we have that, now that we're sort of like in this place where we've regained sovereignty, where, you know, we've done this incredible feat where we threw off the yoke of not just, you know, British colonialism, but also Arab colonialism, like both Christian and Muslim colonialism, which are the two main colonialist forces in the world right now, that we carved out this tiny little sliver of our ancient indigenous land, and we, you know, brought back and sort of like revitalized our ancient language, which was not like commonly spoken. And we've done all of these incredible acts of decolonization and re-indigenizing and re-Judifying our Jewish existence, and like unifying our nation from the four corners of the world, which is, you know, biblical. We're now sort of uniquely positioned to actually do the rest of the work. Which I think is returning to who we're supposed to be. And I think
talk about it in the biggest, most beautiful. Tell us.
Forget about this beautiful. You're a Tachlis person. Yeah, give us, you know, every person who hears this podcast. There's thousands of Jews listening to you right now. Hundreds of thousands are listening right now.
Millions.
All 15 millions have tuned in to this pod. Just give them 3 things, 5 things, 7. I don't know.
One thing.
No, one is too easy. Give us, you know, a short list of what they need to do.
I don't know that I feel qualified to.
There we go.
I will say that when we start actually looking into, you have to remember, I'm still like a radical. I still have this like anarchist in me. I'm not going to tell.
That's okay. But this is perfect because we want that. Clearly, I'll make it easy just so you know the premise is easy for you. Clearly, what we've been doing is not working. Okay, let's start. That's the starting point. The way we've approached our Jewishness is not working fully. The way we've approached our relationship with the nations of the world is not working. Clearly, it's been part of the big plan. I'll give the creator that, and it's moving everyone along. But we haven't gotten to we're now entering the final act. Maybe, hopefully, you know, according to various sages. So something about what we're doing is not working. Not between us, not as, you know, Orthodox Jews or secular Jews or all the combinations in the middle. That hasn't been working. And the way we're treating the nations of the world and their expressions of anti-Semitism against us, that also is not working. So across the board, stuff is not working. So I think you're very qualified to have an opinion, because so far the existing opinions have not, given us the right outcome. So something has to change. And we're smart people, so let's and we're sitting on thousands of years of good evidence. There's good evidence to what was going on with the Jews throughout history. What did our sages say? They left us, you know, a very clear message, surrounded by a lot of confusing ideas, but there's a very clear thread through everything. And you touched on it here as well. So based on all of those clues, maybe let's focus on the things that we can really look to maybe add to our lives, to our attitudes.
So if we are to believe what is passed down to us in our traditions, then there is a very clear message. There's a very clear direction and directive that Hashem has given to our nation over and over and over and over and over again ad nauseum. And like, we've seen, and if we're to learn from our mistakes in the past, like, why did we lose the first Beit HaMikdash?
We know. We say it here on the show all the time.
Why?
It was always an unfounded form of unfounded hatred or turning against each other in one form or another.
The first one was Avodah Zarah. Right. The first one was
the first one was the first one. If you know, the first one was like, let's do we'll do the things that you tell us to do, but we'll also do other things. We'll kind of stray a little bit from the main intention.
It's convenient. We'll try to not, be too different. We'll try to blend in with other people. We'll try to, assimilate. We'll try to, not inconvenience others with our uniqueness. Well, we don't want to stand out too much. We don't want to be Jewish. We just want to, yeah, sure, we'll kind of do what you're asking, but we'll also kind of do what everybody else is doing. And, we just want to be like everybody, like those, when you get, how teenagers just want to be like everybody else. Like that's where we were holding. And Hashem clearly didn't want that. And we were turning away from the source, right? Like the source of everything. We are given this unique tafkid in the world to, to be the spiritual leg upon which the world is resting. And if we don't take that seriously, and if we don't live up to that, then the world kind of crumbles in on us and smashes us down, in the way that if you have a table that's legs are not stable, it falls in on itself, And the second Beit HaMikdash we lost because of Sinat Chinam, because we were hating each other, and all we have to do is look at October 7th. Like everything is there, right? Like as we were approaching October 7th, right? Like there was all of these Afghanot, there was all these Jews were turning against Jews. They were screaming at each other. They were fighting. They were harming.
This close to civil war. Yeah, absolutely.
It was insane, like absolutely insane. And it was so painful to watch. I remember crying and crying and crying, just like watching like our people turn on each other, because it got to the point where they're these outside external non-Jewish systems, right? Like people who, like I was saying at the very beginning, like we've replaced religion and culture and family with these political spaces, right? And like, I'm going to say something that who was it? Rabbi Daniel Katz, I think, said, and it's stuck with me forever, that Jews are not meant to be red or blue, right? Like we're not Democrat or Republican. We're meant to be Am Segula, right? Like the purple in between space, because we have our political system is supposed to be Hisham, like our political system is supposed to be Judaism.
Let's add another, just a little to that. So, while we were in that topic, the punctuation, how's your Hebrew? You're right. Okay. You read with punctuation?
I can read. I've been here for a long time.
Okay, but there's a one thing called segol, right? You know that one? It's three points. So it's 2 points, and the third, that's why it's called a segol, because the middle one, it represents really that Jewish essence of the right line, the left line, and the middle line, which the Jews need to follow. So just a little, yeah, pretty.
That's the crazy thing, is like how everything is all interconnected.
Everything, and
that's one of the things that's like I always used to think about that as like God winking at you. You're like,
yeah,
see what I did there? Like,
but when you use like Segol, like the purple is the blue and the red together, like it's just so incredible everywhere we look.
Don't you remember the guy, this religious DNA biologist, researcher? He was like, he found that if you look at the DNA strand, the helix, right, and has those bridges in it, right? So he counted the molecules between each bridge, right? So and they followed a sequence, right, of the distance, the number of molecules between each bridge. And the sequence was between the first one was 10 molecules, then the second bridge was 5, then the third bridge was 6 molecules, and the fourth bridge was 5 again. And then it repeats 10, 5, 6, 5. Right? It's the Yud Hey Vav Hey. Right? And he goes, don't you see? It's Tate. He was like, so.
Wow.
But and there's more. I don't want to get into that because it sounds people are like, oh no, it's mysticism or this is that. But
for the people,
some people. So the question, good. So finish your stream of thought, because we want to leave people with concrete advice. What do we have to do? What do we have to rebuild the temple? What do we have to do? Keep the Sabbath? Like, what is it? What's the...
So again, I think that it's all like if we look at October 7th, like, you know, like our tradition tells us, right, that on Rosh Hashanah, the Book of Life is opened. On Yom Kippur, the Book of Life is closed. And on Shmini Atzeret, the judgment is passed down, right? And so on Rosh Hashanah, we're screaming in each other's faces. On Yom Kippur, the worst thing I've ever seen happen, you know, outside of like a genocide took place within our nation, which was that, you know, Jews were attacking other Jews on Yom Kippur. And on Shmini Atzeret, which was October 7th, our nation faced the worst genocide that we've experienced since the Holocaust. And it showed us, it really, like, you know, it was that slap across the face that sort of made us realize, like, wait, that's my brother, that's my sister, these are my people, I love these people, and I will fight for these people. And the level of achdut that took place after October 7th was like, it was messianic, it was insane, it was beautiful, it was amazing, and what was built upon that has also been amazing. And I think that we have this problem that I've seen over and over and over and over and over within our nation, that when we're attacked from the outside, we all hold each other's hands and protect each other and fight against the external enemy. But as soon as there's not an external enemy, we fight each other. And so I think one of the most important things that we need to learn is how to see the nekudot tovot in one another, right? Like Rabbi Nachman talks about how there is a spark of ultimate goodness in absolutely every single human being, right? Like when Hashem...
This is the point I was talking about. It's the same point.
Yeah, I like that you said extraterrestrial because it makes it sound alien. But there's this like, and that's not really how I think of it so much, but I'm here for it. But there's this, you know, like when Hashem breathed life into us, Hashem breathed of Hashem's self into us, right? So like we have this faculty that is created from, you know, the essence of God within each of us.
We're a terrestrial being with this, I called it extraterrestrial because, but you could call it whatever you want. It's godly.
You know, like that we are this interesting combination of like organic earth material and something completely holy and divine and revelatory, and a force of, you know, like the creative spark in the world that is constantly animating and reanimating. And if we are able to recognize, like when we get caught up in our own nonsense, when we get caught up in shtuyot and like absolutely trivial garbage, we sometimes, and things like political affiliation or, you know, whatever tribalism, if we replace our traditions with external non-Jewish traditions, we tend to sometimes that becomes a way that we lose the ability to see that in one another, that our ideology, if it's external, if it's not ours, if it's not our indigenous traditions, if it's someone else's, and we've allowed that colonized mentality to take place, we sometimes lose the ability to see that spark of God in one another. And so I think the most critical thing for the healing and evolution of our nation is being able to figure out how to love each other, like truly, 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 to see, recognize that to see and recognize like the incredible beauty in one another, that each and every single one of us are just like, we're different pieces of the same body, right? Like, you know, you might be the ear and I might be the fingernail, but like we're all on the same body, and we need to figure out not just how to tolerate one another, but how to like love and appreciate and work together. And I think if we look at our traditions, they tell us very much what we're supposed to do, you know, like, and if we take on some of those things, whether it's from a place of like wanting to be close to Hashem or wanting to be close to our people or wanting to understand what our ancient indigenous traditions are, there are so many different entry points into Jewishness that I think are, and everybody's soul is at a different level, right? Like everybody relates to Jewishness and to God and to one another in different ways. So I don't feel qualified to tell people like what to do. I can tell people what I find the most powerful, which is kashrut and Shabbat, like living in this, like this mindful way where every single piece of what we do is sort of elevating the mundane into something holy, right? To take food or drink and to recognize its source and to ingest it in a way that we are elevating it and ourselves into something that's bigger than that, like to see the phenomenological, mundane, material world as an opportunity to interact with God is beyond powerful, and it's a form of inner cultivation as well. Like it's a way that like in the way that like Buddhists meditate, or like there's everybody has these like incredible mystical traditions within their communities, but ours exists as well. And if we are able to sort of tap into something simple, but something fundamental, right? Like Shabbat, kashrut, like chagim, things like that, that just taking on like a little bit, lighting Shabbat candles, like little things that pull you back into, this rut that our ancestors have carved, these things that transcend time and space, that are so powerful when we if we choose to sort of step into that, they really change our trajectory entirely and add so much to our lives.
I think you said all the right things. Like we don't. Yeah, good. That was the whole point, is just to remind ourselves of all these things. Usually that's when Seth and I talked before.
Torah learning, like so many Jews know nothing about Judaism. So many Jews know nothing about what we believe or what we think or what our ancestors did or where we're from. So many Jews know nothing. Just like learning about our traditions is so powerful.
Well, it's hard to look inside of you when there's so much noise on the outside and so many things, draw your attention. And it's inside means inside yourself, inside your own people. It's hard. You have to sometimes take the long path, right? Before you can actually go back and take a good hard look at yourself, the good, the bad of it. Some things people don't like. We've had people on the show here that vehemently rejected the idea that we have anything to do in the world, and I don't want to be responsible for anything. Humanity is whatever it is. I just want to be a small part in humanity that lives in my little corner. But but you can't. It's all interconnected. Either you find your, as you said in at the very beginning, either you find your niche to correct or you don't. Except the only difference is that we strongly see, we believe, and we now see also, like in action, the point that each one needs to correct is really just how I relate to everything else. It starts with that, and especially how I relate to my fellow human being. That's the only thing I can really change. And I think you're a good example, because you've done you've had your boots on the ground and your sleeves rolled up, and you were doing things, and you saw like, okay, this is broken, and this is broken, and this is broken. What can I do? I have to first start with the thing that's maybe broken inside of me. And that was, to me, that was beautiful, because it kind of just brought it all home. And I think that's a reminder, which people just need to be reminded of this. It's so easy to forget. And then you look for everything outside of it to correct, except for yourself.
True. I think people also don't recognize our own power. I think that people are afraid or have been smushed down, stamped down, stripped of their their own power. They don't recognize what incredible, majestic miracles each and every single one of us are. Like what it took for us to come into this world at exactly this moment and exactly the way that we are. It's not dumb. It's not like it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It's not happenstance. There's a reason. And I think that people often, like lose sight of how magic we are. And to sort of rediscover that magic is I think a very important piece of being able to own it and to utilize it and to bring that into the world and to like come in, like step up and into our highest selves,
The force of gravity is so strong. The force of the ego is so strong. And in order to be able to do this, we have to support each other. And I think on purpose, if the force of gravity and ego was weak, we wouldn't need to do all those things you just said. It would be easy. But to do all of those things that you just said, which I think is our highest ideal, we need to support each other. We need to constantly come together and bring all our sparks together and create this big flame. And then all of those negative forces, we'll see it's all part of the same system. And it's all there for us to just keep increasing the love, increasing the good, increasing the support of each other. I'm super impressed by what I know you have teachers, but you clearly did a lot of birurim, a lot of figuring things out. And we talked to a lot of people and in this realm. And a lot of people are pointing everywhere, and just impressed that it's becoming more and more clear where our solution is. It's in us. I think you said that when we don't do it, then the nations of the world push us to do it.
Lekadesh et mashu, like to make something holy, right? Like when, like the real essence of lekadesh is to sort of, how do you say that? Like to remove something.
It's to separate.
Yeah. Like when you separate milk and meat, you separate,
Yeah.
like from Shabbat from the rest of the week, you separate holidays from the rest of, like.
That's what it is. I select you out of everyone else.
Correct. And so we're not everybody else. We're not. And the more that we pretend that we are everyone else, the more that we continue living this colonized lives where we don't even see, let alone accept or step into our unique beauty and power in the world. Like we're sort of, it's chava, like if we're able to recognize the importance and beauty in our unique identity and experience, if we're able to lekadesh, if we're to make ourselves holy in that way, and to decolonize and to re-indigenize and to step into Jewishness that way. And again, I'm not telling anybody how to do that. And I'm not saying that there's any one right way, but there are many different entry points. Then I think that we find that the more that we are proudly, unapologetically, wholly leaning into who we are and who we're meant to be, the less that the world sort of punches us in the face, like it's, and I see this actually in like, I had this really interesting experience in the Shtachim like many years ago. I think it was in like Bat Ayin maybe, or like Tekoa. I think it was Bat Ayin, where you have this group of Jews who are super Jewish. They're religious, they're spiritual, and they're also like very woo-woo, like mystical hippies, but they're unapologetic about it. They're like, this is who we are, and nobody messes with them. Like the Arab villages around them do not even try.
It's true. You see it now also. I mean, you see it every day. Wherever Jews are moving in, the Arabs just run away. They're abandoning their whatever half-built illegal houses and grazing areas that just run away. When the Jews say, I am a Jew, I'm of this land, they're gone. It's amazing.
And I've also worked with Arabs. I worked with Arabs for 22, 23, 24 years, and they, there's one, especially Palestinians, there's one thing that they'll tell the outside world. And then there's another way that they'll speak to people that they actually believe are like in their circles, And so I made it into that space. And I've been told, that they actually like, they do respect Jews who actually like fight, the Jews that like don't apologize for their identity. They have absolutely zero respect. I don't remember what he said, but I was talking to this Arab Palestinian activist once who was telling me, he was like, something along the lines of like the worst of your people are the ones that are always trying to like get us to like them. It's like, why? Like, isn't that like flattering?
No. That's a whole other conversation about understanding tribalism in the Middle East. But
right. It also goes into like when we know who we are and when we step into our power, when we step into our truth, when we step into our identity, when we own our real, beautiful, ancient indigenous identity, other people see it and they recognize it and they respect it. And it's something that we need to stop apologizing for, and it's something we need to be proud of.
Ateret, this is a great place to end. Unfortunately, I mean, I just told Seth, we should have 3-hour conversations. Like, I'm in the middle of work here, so we'll continue this. I put a quote in the chat. We ask every guest to read a quote from the sources. This one is from Degel Machane Ephraim. I think it's very apropos to everything we discussed.
I have to turn on this way.
You can turn it. Yeah, you're on the phone. You're allowed to switch the phone to read it. Yeah. No, you can make the phone vertical. It's okay.
I believe it. Wait, I can do this.
You can do this. Okay, go for it.
It is good for the children of Israel to always unite together in one bundle. Then even those who are of lesser degree help their friends sanctify with more holiness and attain more. I need to change it. The upper one needs the one below it, and the lower one needs the one above it. Likewise, you should always be bundled in one bundle, and then your roots will unite as well. This is the meaning of you will be unto me a segula, meaning that you will be a segula in the upper world as well, when you are in one unity below. Degel Machane Ephraim.
Beautiful.
What a joy. What a great conversation.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for your time today. Oh, she's good. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, no, she's here. Everyone, this was another great talk by with the Jew Function with Ateret Violet Shmuel. If you liked this and if you like our talks, please share, comment, especially comments. This helps on every platform. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, this helps get this talk before more people. And that's what we just need, a reawakening, a reminder of what makes us Jewish, why it's so great, why it's the best indigenous people to belong to, indigenous of an ideology, but also very much part of this land. So please spread this far and wide, and join us next week. We have some more great guests lined up. Thank you, Ateret, so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ateret. We'll see you soon.
It was great to meet you, and
bye, Leo.
We'll have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.